Okay, this is my Module 3 presentation, Conflicting Rights in Education. I'm going to talk about censorship here. So my question that's been kind of going on in our school district is, what role should teachers, school board members, and administrators play in the approval process of new books and reading materials? Recently, our school board has removed 27 books and placed them under review due to concerns about the approval process and the general appropriateness of the literature in question. This happened, I think, right at the end of last school year, but there's been conversations about reading materials for months now, and I know our district isn't alone in that. The school board has expressed that they would like to review all materials used in the ELA department and evaluate the materials used for appropriateness for the upcoming school year. So there are two main sides of this discussion. The argument one, back in 2020 and 2021, when the books were initially purchased via a grant, the process through which the books were approved was rushed and not done correctly. So in that way, they think that the board needs to go back and review that process, or even make a new process. There's a lot of conversations about kind of rules and regulations going on right now. Some of the books have raised concerns regarding critical race theory and having political agendas or biases. Some of the books use language that is concerning, and several members of the school board are concerned about the books conflicting with the core family values of many students that attend the school. Board members and administrators should be vetting all material taught to students. That's kind of the main argument coming from the school board, and even a superintendent has released several statements saying these things. The second argument, there's going to be more than two arguments in an issue like this, but these are kind of the predominant voices that I'm hearing. Again, I'm a biased person coming in. But the books were purchased with a grant designed to diversify the literature available at the high school, and were done so quickly because of a time constraint. The books were onboarded according to a board-approved process over the summer, but the board-approved process, I think, was out of date or something, where that's argument one's kind of come back to that. These books offer students the chance to choose from a variety of texts and introduce students to modern, highly influential, diverse authors. Teachers should have the skills to teach these books in a way that is neutral and encourages respectful discourse. If the books were approved, the books should be available to students. And of course, you're going to get some intermingling between these two perspectives. A brief analysis of argument one. Like I said, I'm a biased voice here. I'm an ELA teacher. I've read all the books, all 27 of the books, and I think they're great books, so just to be very transparent. But I tried to come at this analysis of argument one from a fairly unbiased perspective as much as I could. And I think the biggest thing that I see is the scare behind critical race theory. And the truth of the matter is, the scare is fairly manufactured and used as a buzzword that perpetuates white supremacy. You can do your own research on this. I can also send out several useful links that talk about critical race theory and how it became such a political issue and where it originated. It was specifically, it's a high level of law theory that is taught at graduate levels and above in an academic setting, and it's different from what goes on in a high school classroom. The school board has said, and the superintendent has recently said, that we want to teach our students what to think, we want to teach our students how to think, not what to think. I reversed that statement. And I think that's fair, but also it's hard to teach someone how to think without giving them just neutral material. Here, let's see. There is a statement on some of our resources that says a student's exercise of speech or expression is legal and constitutionally protected so long as it doesn't endanger the public, disrupt the learning environment, advocate the use of illegal substances, or other violations of the law. So this is just basically outlining a student's constitutional right to free speech. Blaming, banning of material or censorship in general because of a faulty process is a repeated historical process that has resulted in escaping the blame for accepting many racist policies and ideologies throughout history. So this is from what I'm hearing from argument one, is a lot of blame being put on the process, a lot of fear about what and how students will react to these books, when in fact they've been exposed to all of these topics in different ways, and as we can see from their constitutionally protected right, reading does not endanger the public. It does not disrupt the learning environment. In fact, my job as an ELA teacher is to read with my students. And many of these books do advocate against the use of illegal substances or other violations of the law. While they may talk about the use of illegal substances or other violations of the law, they're certainly not advocating for those activities. Here's an analysis of argument 2. From the First Amendment rights considerations, this little resource that we had, I thought this example was really pertinent. One newspaper clipping was about recent local protests of a war. One student asked if the teacher had ever participated in a war protest, and the teacher responded that she had. After numerous complaints from parents, the school decided not to renew the teacher's contract. So I think it's really scary on a teacher's perspective to have discussions of this literature and of literature in general. I don't know. It's not necessarily censored right now. I'm sure there are many cases where there has been similar instances as to what this teacher experienced. But from what I've experienced, it's just it's hard to know what is going to set someone off, right? So as a teacher, I want to make sure that all voices and all students feel welcome, heard, and appreciated in my classroom. That said, I also want to be able to respond to questions about racism, questions about sexism, questions about LGBTQ rights in an honest way without receiving blame that I'm either perpetuating some hidden agenda or teaching kids about something that might get them in trouble. I don't know. So it's a really delicate time to be an ELA teacher when you're handed classics that talk about these things, and new books that talk about these things that are like really, really good books and important things for students to discuss. Overall, I think there's just a lack of trust in teachers, and I get that there's a need to control and have certain standards for how topics and things are discussed with students, but I think it becomes really dangerous when we start dipping our toes into censorship. As a teacher, I feel like I should be able to say that racism is wrong, but I know that that's like a really controversial statement right now. I wish that it wasn't. Another thing that I would say to kind of analyze argument 2 a little bit more is the idea that reading these texts are perpetuating kind of like a hidden agenda or something like that. And I mean, like, people have been reading Orwellian texts for like years, and they don't just magically become socialists or communists overnight, right? So it's a miracle if I can get my students to sit down and read an entire book with me. So it's kind of like this big cognitive dissonance between like, well, we're endangering these children by exposing them to this material, or like this book was written by an activist, so we can't talk about that in your classroom. When like I don't even know if they're reading the whole book, right? There's kind of like there's some disconnect here. So yeah, I don't know. Those two sides and the analysis of both of those sides is not like something that I have like firm conclusions about, other than I know that censorship is wrong and that teachers need to be trusted, and that students can take it, right? Students are smart, and our goal is to help them think critically, and to do that, they need to be exposed to opinions that push them, in my opinion. Here's some lessons learned. So with all of these books going under review, there was a board meeting where students could come and talk about their opinions and about this issue, and magically that board meeting was the only one that wasn't posted on Facebook Live. They blamed it on a staffing shortage, but I mean, any of us could have run a Facebook Live. You just kind of have to click a button. So there's been just like subtle things like that have been really, really challenging to deal with. So here are some quotes from the same source that I used previously about censorship. Some even suggest that limiting student speech has a disproportionate impact on minority students and limits their voices even more because of differences in language between individuals. Like I said, these books were purchased specifically for the purpose of diversifying our literature choices at the high school, and I don't know that if we were dealing with a group of white authors, we would be having these same issues. And I know that's a hard truth to digest and stomach and internalize, but it's just so glaringly obvious when you look at the impact that these books are having on students of color. It's impactful, I guess. I don't know a better word for that. Here's another quote to consider. Where students are limited in what they can say, administrators have the broad ability to censor almost all speech. Even if a student does not use some form of protected speech, the likelihood that the school will be aware that the speech is protected is low. I feel like this board meeting thing was a huge lesson in the intricacies and the delicateness of the situation that we're in, and a lot of other school districts are in right now. The fact that these students couldn't have their voices heard on the level that everyone else, on a platform that is accessible to most people, is not okay, in my opinion. On the right side of the screen, there are some links, Teaching with Equity and the New York Times article about what critical race theory actually is, that are really interesting and helpful if you're curious about educating yourselves on these terms. And I want to draw a distinction between critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching. They're not interchangeable. This is from the New York, I think it's from actually Teaching with Equity. These two terms are not interchangeable. Critical race theory deals with how systems are impacted by racism. Culturally responsive teaching asks schools and teachers to not only recognize the backgrounds of the students in the classroom, but also help students explore and learn about cultures and experiences that are different from our own. And there's so much research about the impact of culturally responsive teaching and how important it is. And so I would just encourage all of you to read up on that as well, and to not be nervous or scared when you hear the words critical race theory and start to kind of like, I don't know, take apart the assumption that critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching are like the same thing, because they're not. Here's a list of my sources. I used a lot of the sources on Blackboard as well to help find the previous quotes. Like I said, we're not the only school district that's been struggling with this, and there are multiple perspectives of all different kinds, and I'm excited to chat with people in the discussion. Even if you really disagree with me, I'm excited to talk with you and to hear your perspective and your opinions. I think the only way that we can grow and learn as educators is to really, really listen to one another and our own unique experiences. So, thank you.